For anyone who knows me, you know that diversity is really important to me. In all the shows that I produce, diversity in ideas, diversity in speakers, diversity in community. I decided to create the Big Talk Roundtable so that I could have a conscious conversation with my colleagues and speakers about race. Enjoy. Hello, friends. I am Tricia Brouk, writer, producer, director, curator of the Speaker Salon, and founder of the Big Talk Academy. Thank you so much for joining the Big Talk Roundtable today, a conscious conversation. It is my mission to elevate the voices of people with important messages and stories that they need to share in the world. Because when we do share these stories, you can change and even save lives. We can make the world a better place. And when I direct a show or produce a speaking event, or even gather my community, it is very important that I create a safe space for vulnerability and transformation. And that is my desire here today. In the wake of the shooting of Ahmaud Arbery and all of the irresponsible communications coming from the White House, I felt that it was time to have a discussion. Let voices be heard and find a way to encourage and facilitate understanding, compassion, love, while igniting and inspiring the change we need so desperately. It is May 21st, and we are, for the first time in history, every person on the planet having a shared experience. COVID-19 has reminded us that we are connected and that human connection is profound. However, when something happens like Ahmaud Arbery being shot while jogging, it makes us realize that we are still very much disconnected. In order to stay present today, we have moved from a live stream because of some technical difficulties. So we will be uploading this later and happy to respond to all of your comments then. I am truly honored to be moderating today's roundtable discussion to bring unique perspectives for thoughtful conversation. And I want to start by introducing our incredible guest panelists. Nydia Han is an Emmy-winning journalist and TEDx speaker who is passionate about amplifying underrepresented voices. She is also a former Speaker Who Dares, who took my stage 2 years ago and is an incredible advocate. Gisela Adisa is a Broadway television and voiceover actress who has studied both drama and African studies. We've had the pleasure of working together and will continue to do so, I'm sure. Antuan Magic Raimone is a universal swing for the acclaimed Broadway hit Hamilton. Identify yourselves when I introduce you. Oh, your names are up. He's a TEDx speaker and a champion of light, love, and joy for those that want change. He is also a TEDx speaker from my event, TEDx Lincoln Square, and we have worked together on multiple shows. Andrew David Sotomayor is a composer, arranger, and music director based in New York City. He was recently the MD on the tour of Margaritaville. We have worked on many shows together and are currently working on a new project, which I'm really excited about. LeRon Barton is a writer and TEDx speaker who currently resides in San Francisco and recently published the article, Why Being a Black Man in America Never Feels Safe. He is also a Speaker Who Dares, and we've had the privilege of having him on that stage this year. Selena Wilson is unable to join us today, and I'm hoping that we can have that conversation with her in the future. Ming Shelby is an educator, speaker, and podcaster whose happiest days are connecting with others and inspiring them to be courageous in their lives. Ming is very much a part of the Big Talk Academy and membership community. It's so great you're here, Ming. Tamika Felder is a television producer, speaker, author, and cancer survivor who is on a mission to eradicate cancer, advocate for patient voices, and mobilize others to live in purpose. Tamika is also very much part of the TEDx Big Talk membership community and the Academy. Thank you all for being here and having this conscious conversation with me and with one another today. I think it is really important that we give voice. You are all speakers, you are all performers, you are all showing up in the world as your highest self. And it is my desire that this conversation today will inspire others. I want to start with you, LeRon, because you took the Speakers Who Dare stage with a talk called The Talk. And it was very impressive to me that you were sharing this information and also sharing it in a way that was powerful, direct, and educational. I'd love for you to just start by sharing with our audience and our listeners and our members here what that meant to you and why you wanted to share that talk.
Thank you for that intro, Tricia. I always wanted to get on a big stage and talk about race. I feel like that my story needs to be heard, and that is the story of the young Black man in America. And I felt that one of the many, I guess, pastimes we sort of go through is is hearing the talk. This was something that my mother and my father told me as I got older. And what the talk was is that it's just essentially suggestions, tips, and instructions on how to move and operate in a world full of racism, white supremacy, particularly when you come across police officers. I remember when I got my learner's permit and I was getting ready to get like my driver's license, and my mother became worried, and she set me down and and she was pretty much like, look, you're getting older, you're going to be driving, you will be stopped by the police. So these are some things that you need to do, such as when an officer pulls you over, you need to be as calm as possible. You need to be non-threatening, and you need to be compliant. Not just the usual, yes sir, ma'am, but you want to put that person at ease, because in my community, police are very adversarial, to say the least. And as I got older and became a mentor to a young Black man, this was around the time when Trayvon Martin got killed, and during the Black Lives Matter movement, I set my mentee down, and I pretty much gave him the same talk that my mother gave me, because for me, Tricia, and everyone else, it's important for us to be honest with young people, particularly young Black men, about racism. We need to let them know, look, you are Black, so there's going to be certain things that you cannot do. There's going to be certain things that you're going to have to overcome, and there's going to be certain challenges that you will have to deal with every day. And that's what I wanted to do when giving the talk on your stage.
I'd like to, Nydia just walked away. I do want to give the table to Nydia in a second, because she just produced and hosted The Virus of Hate, Asian American Community on ABC. There's so much conversations that are still being had. And I want to know how you feel about the constant energy that you are giving to the conversations around race. Nydia, would you take this for me?
I will, and thank you so much for doing this, Tricia. I really appreciate it, and I really apologize. I had to step out just a minute ago. I had two emergencies, one related to the news story that I'm reporting at 4 and at 6 today, and then another related to an iPhone that's about to lose its battery. So,
busy woman.
I just wrote a piece for abcnews.com. It should go live today or tomorrow. And, and I also yesterday participated in an Asian American Journalists Association conversation about the virus of hate. And I think it is so important that we do talk about it. Whether you are a Black American or an Asian American or a Latino, Latinx American. Someone said to me yesterday, don't you think by constantly talking about and showing incidents of racism, in my case against the Asian American community, don't you think you are doing some harm by doing that? And I said, absolutely not. I said, I think that we have to acknowledge and expose the fact that these incidents are happening. And because then we can have this conversation and we can show why these incidents are happening. And so, we did a story that showed that, there wasn't this spike in racist, discriminatory incidents against Asian Americans until President Trump started using the term Chinese virus and Wuhan virus. And we interviewed a researcher from Columbia University that showed that when President Trump uses those words, racist language against Chinese and Asian Americans on Twitter went up 900%. So I think if we want to try to change the narrative and change our history, then we have to acknowledge the reality of our situation as communities of color. And I think the only way to do that is to get people to talk about it, to report incidents, and from there we can talk about solutions, and we can talk about, you know, messages of hope and optimism and how we can all sort of stand together. But I think the first step is reporting these incidents and having these conversations. So Tricia, this is a conversation that I'm honored to be a part of, so that we can get these messages out there. So thank you.
Thank you, Nydia. I think that what you're saying makes a lot of sense, is that the conversation needs to be ongoing, and that leads to ultimately a solution. And hopefully one day the conversations that you have with your 13-year-old Black son or with your children of mixed race won't need to happen, right? I'd love to hear from you. Feel free to unmute yourselves and join in. Gisela, you have something.
There we go. First off, again, thank you so much for deciding to do this. This is something that really just needs to happen in kitchens, or, well, maybe not right now because we're all in our own homes, but just in everyday life. Mm-hmm. It would be wonderful if it didn't take a pandemic to amplify what's always been, and these talks that are happening in some households, maybe they're not happening in white spaces, maybe they don't need to happen in white spaces, but now that we're all stuck inside and there is no distraction, it's life or death. And thank goodness for social media. It's kind of a double-edged sword, but there's kind of no choice now. You have to sit down and talk about this. It's life or death, and we're showing you videotapes of it happening. And still, there are people that will say, as Nydia mentioned, don't you think you're doing more harm? Or they'll come up with any excuse or reason to not deal with the problem. But the pink elephant is the size of Texas now, and it's always been there. It's not just that it's not a spike simply because of Trump. It's amplifying something that was always there. So I just thank you for giving us this platform here via a conference, but I hope that once we quote unquote open the outside and business starts and people try to resume their lives and go along the path of whatever the new normal is, that they continue these talks. That the fact that you had to have your parents speak to you about how to behave in front of a cop, I'm pretty sure that's not a discussion that needs to happen in maybe white spaces.
Which is why,
really?
Which is why we as white people need to be having this conversation as well. You just mentioned briefly that maybe we don't need to be talking about it in our homes. We absolutely.
Yes. But I'm saying, like, this is kind of making it so that you have no choice. Like, it's on the TV. You can't run off to your job and forget about it, or go to your Zumba class or whatever. It's the perfect time to sit everyone down and say, I just want you to know, I had to have a talk with my 10-year-old son about how to behave when he sees a police officer, because his behavior, whether he's calm or not, will be treated differently and looked at differently because he happens to be enveloped in a darker skin, because of the fear that has been put onto our DNA for centuries.
I think you were right in using the word always. This has always been here, and it is being amplified now because we're paying attention, because of social media, because of who is on the Hill. Yes. And I think that being able to give voice, speak your truth, and not apologize for the reality or make it smaller. It's important that I want you all to be your greatest, biggest selves and to tell everyone, us all, the truth, right? Like,
absolutely.
You have a thought.
Oh, you know what's interesting? Like, and it's something that Nydia said. You know, a lot of times when we are talking about race, you know, talking about how this impacts every facet of our lives, some people may say, well, I mean, you know, if we just stop paying attention to race, won't it just go away? How come we just can't be colorblind? And, you know, to that, I say two things. for one, we live in a race-based society, so it's impossible for me to be colorblind because certain advantages, certain disadvantages are given because of the color of your skin. Secondly, I want you to recognize my skin color. I want you to recognize my race because that, no pun intended, but that colors my life. So by being Black, I want you to see that, hey, my history of my people being taken here, of just being discriminated, just racist terrorism. I mean, I want you to see all that, because when you're able to see that, you're truly able to see me.
Yeah. And I think, go ahead.
Nydia?
No, I was just saying, when people say they don't see color, how could you not see color? I'm looking at all these faces, the skin tones, the hair textures, and I just see so much beauty in the diversity. I also think that, it's important for us to have these conversations and, like Tricia said, speak our truth. A lot of times we feel like we need to be apologetic because we don't want to rock the boat, or we don't want to have the same conversation. We don't want to maybe alienate a certain audience that may be following us. But then I ask, where is your humanity? When you care about people, because the reality is people are stuck at home, but they're still turning a blind eye to this conversation because they think that it doesn't concern them because that person, maybe they didn't comply with police, or maybe this virus, it started there. So obviously it is that type of virus. But this is where we all have to take a stand and say, no, enough is enough. And will we be dealing with this for a very long time? Unfortunately, yes. History has already shown us that, but that does not mean that we stop and give up on humanity, because I do have a great hope for people. And, there are beautiful, wonderful people out there who have something to say. And sometimes we just need to prompt them to say it by saying, this is what is happening to my community. This is what I see happening in other communities. Let's talk about it.
And I believe the necessity of having these conversations is that there are going to be people in communities who they're not living in diverse communities.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's no other way they're going to hear or have this conversation if there aren't voices amplifying it and speaking out to it. And that could mean you are living in a predominantly white space, a predominantly brown space, like insert color, and you could be living in that predominant space wherever you are. So when you are surrounded by people who represent and reflect how you look without diversity, you do just in a natural sense shut yourself off from the rest of the world. Even me living in New York, that space I'm living in a diverse space. So in my day-to-day, I don't perceive there's the possibility of extreme or overt racism happening.
Right.
And there is, even in New York City, which is one of the most diverse cities in the world, if not.
It's the bubble effect.
Exactly. You're in a bubble. And so it's, with that beautiful bubble, or that naive or ignorant bubble that you're living in, you need voices that are cutting through that to say, yes, this is where we are. This is what's nice. And these are the realities that also exist. Precisely.
I mean, life in this country specifically is just, for any person of color or anyone who is not, because it is a white supremacist system, it's a male based system. It favors white men. It was created hundreds of years ago with a construct that basically separates and divides and conquers. And I mean, from the casual killing act of 1669, where you could murder someone just because they're Black, because they're perceived of as property, because people of color who were enslaved were considered 3/5 of a person. Like, that is ingrained from a long time ago, and people don't want to talk about that right now. And I understand that. I understand they say, oh, you're making mountains out of molehills. If we stop talking about it, it will go away. It's because it's not that they don't see race as they don't see your color. It's they don't want to see anything that reminds them that I have been brought up in a system that's maybe benefited me, but not you. And
Absolutely.
there's the fear from it that, as Antuan pointed out, comes from us being sequestered and the redlining that's happened in this country to create ethnic ghettos, really. And even though you live in a beautiful gated community and everyone happens to look like you, let's say down in Oklahoma City, you're in a ghetto, you're in a cultural ghetto, and you're actually doing yourself more harm than good. Even though you're living a great protected, sheltered life, you're really living in fear of someone because of their skin color.
Absolutely.
And trapping them in a space, like trapping them so they can't get out when they're just doing their job or just going for a jog or
trying to just live,
visiting a friend.
People,
it's almost insane that they don't realize, even though they're not living in poverty or there's not crime in their neighborhood, they're jailing themselves and robbing themselves of a full human experience.
That's such a powerful way of expressing that. You're absolutely right. And it's ignorance and fear and lack of conversation.
It's fear. This country's brain has been pickled in fear, which separates us all.
They're terrified of losing their privilege.
Right.
Yes.
Tricia and Mike, it's something like that I like to say in response to what Giselle said, which I agree with pretty much everything you said. The thing about it is like when you said, people of color in bondage. I mean, I think that whenever we talk about race, we need to be 100% specific and honest. And the fact of the matter is like there weren't really people of color in bondage. There were just Black people in bondage. And it's kind of like what Nydia, she produced a special, or she wrote a piece on Asian people receiving a specific type of racism. I think that when we talk about race, we need to be specific by saying that there's going to be certain types of attacks that certain people will get. I'm a Black man, so I'm not going to receive the sort of the animus from people who are pissed off about the coronavirus. But I will receive a certain animus from the police, or people thinking that I'm a thug, or people thinking that I'm a gangster. And so I'm not trying to push back on the people of color statement. It's just that I don't particularly use it. I'm a Black man, so I'm not going to have the same challenges as say Ming will have, but Ming is not going to have the same challenges that I'm going to have. So
I totally understand and appreciate that. It's just that when this country first started, it wasn't just Black people that were enslaved. There were people from indigenous people, but they were pretty much eradicated by disease and just overworking. They did bring Black people, African people. They also had slaves that were Caucasian. They were from the lesser European countries.
But they weren't enslaved for the amount of time that Black people were enslaved in slavery. I grew up in Summerville, South Carolina, right outside of Charleston, where it was literally one of the ports of slavery. My grandfather, not my great-grandfather, not my great-great-grandfather, but my grandfather, my mother's father, was a sharecropper. That's how the generations in South Carolina and along the Georgia coast can really go back to slavery and what people have been through. I think that we also have to talk about, when we talk about slavery, that it was enslaved people. I love that you use the term enslaved. A lot of times people don't use that when they talk about slavery. There were not people who were happy to get whatever pieces of food they got, or, that they were allowed to go to church. The reality is that Black people, Africans, were bought over and they were enslaved. And these were not people who were just random people or animals. These were people who at home, they were doctors, they were teachers, they were lawyers. There were many different things, and they were bought over to America to be enslaved for money, for profit. And I think it's very important that if we talk about that we say those things.
Agreed, definitely.
Nydia,
What I found interesting about that, Sorry.
I want to give Nydia an opportunity. She had a thought.
I was just thinking, I've been thinking so much during this pandemic about the common threads that we do have. I mean, this is the first time in my life, I have talked a lot about feeling othered. This is the first time in my life that I have felt afraid. So as I've been covering assaults and attacks on Asian Americans, I've suddenly become afraid for members of my own family, especially, my 80-year-old dad as he walks around Philadelphia. And what that has made me think about is the fact that, I have always stood by my Black brothers and sisters and my brown brothers and sisters, but now I feel like I understand all of you just a little bit better. And again, I can't imagine being in your shoes and walking in your shoes and being scared during normal times every day. But I can understand it just a little bit better now. And I think for me as a journalist and as a human being, having that clearer lens will sort of inform the things that I do and the way that I think moving forward. And I think that's really helpful. I also think about how the coronavirus has really impacted all of us, communities of color, poor people, marginalized people the most. I mean, African Americans are dying at far greater numbers than anyone else in this country, and that's because of institutional racism within our healthcare system. Asian Americans, in terms of if you look at unemployment numbers and just economic figures, the impact on Asian Americans and business owners is staggering. And that's because of racism, because people don't want to go to Asian American owned businesses because they're scared. And then the other thing I think about is that, no one is immune to this virus of hate. Like right now, at least as it's coronavirus related, it's targeting Asian Americans. But, the Jews were persecuted for Black Death, Irish immigrant workers for cholera, and, African Americans were shunned because of Ebola. So this virus of hate moves. Right now it's directed at us, but next month, next year, it's going to be someone else. And so I do think a lot about allyship and how important that is. When I pitch stories in our newsroom that are Asian related, I think, unfortunately, sometimes it kind of falls on deaf ears and people feel like, oh, there's Nydia pitching another Asian story. Yeah. But when my, white and Black and brown brothers and sisters chime in and say, hey, I think we need to cover this, I think we need to do this, it is so powerful and it is so meaningful. And I'm so grateful to my colleagues who do that. And there are many of them. So these are the things that I'm thinking about these days. And I just, when, the hashtag I run with Maud, I noticed so much how a lot of the Asian American groups and that I'm a part of, so many of them were encouraging and asking Asian Americans to participate in that hashtag and in that campaign and stand up for Ahmaud Arbery. And I thought that was just a really powerful and good thing. And I hope we see more of that.
I do too. I think it's progress.
I like to highlight a very wonderful distinction that Nydia made. There is a difference between feeling othered and a difference in feeling afraid because of the color of your skin. And I think that is a remarkable distinction that I hadn't thought of. And I'm so glad that you said that. So I just wanted to highlight that. So there's a difference between othered, a difference between being afraid of how you look. Just keep that in mind, viewers.
Andrew.
That is quite powerful. That distinction really resonated with me. It's fascinating because I've felt othered, but I've never actually felt afraid. And that's a luxury that I've gotten to live with. But I grew up in a household where my father was from Puerto Rico. And it was fascinating growing up. I remember seeing a standardized test that I got in Florida, and it said, they had the boxes, it said Black, white, Hispanic, non-white. And I remember going home and being like, I'm not really sure what to put there. And his answer to me was, make sure you put white, because if they find out, you'll get held back. And you're confusing. So he told me, he's like, they won't notice. But then add to that years of people obviously noticing that I'm something, but it created this whole identity crisis. And I resented him for a very long time for trying to do that to me, trying to strip me of my ethnic identity. And then it had to grow into the fact that he was afraid. And the racism in this country is so systemic and so deep and runs so deep. And he was a very private man. He never spoke about his past, but I can't even imagine what he went through, that to protect his son, he would say, you're light enough. Just act white. Tell everyone you're white because it will be safer for you. You'll have a better experience in this country than I had when I came here when I was 13. And it's fascinating. And I was protected. I did not live in fear, but I lament that he must have to teach that to me at such a young age.
That really resonates with me, Andrew, because I'm first generation American as well. My parents, my father is West African and my mother is also from the Caribbean, from Haiti. And while I definitely can't pass for anything but someone maybe who seems African American, and I am, but in a different cultural, from a different cultural perspective. So it's been interesting being that first generation American, watching African Americans with Southern ties and their opinions and perspectives on things. My perspective, my father's perspective, coming from a former British colony, and my mother coming from a former French colony, and the way that they were very proud of themselves, but also very aware of, this is the construct, and I'm going to send you to these schools, and we're going to live in these neighborhoods where you're going to be as educated as possible. And maybe I can't be white, but I will definitely think white, speak white.
Right.
Not that they ever use those terms, and I don't use them either, but they knew that that would help me navigate my way through the everyday macro and microaggressions of being brown in this
Something
world.
I want to point out, you're all amazing, first of all. Thank you for being so candid and articulate in how you're expressing these deep truths. Something I want to point out that I think people are not conscious of is you are all incredibly successful. And that doesn't mean that you don't deal with, and I use the words you used, Tamika, deal with racism every single day. You live with it, you deal with it. It is part of your inhale and your exhale. And that's why I think these conversations are so important, because just because you're successful, wealthy, whatever it is, whatever those labels are, does not mean that you are not experiencing racism every single day in this country. And I want to just point that out.
You know what's crazy? Like, I was having this conversation with my friend Alicia, and she, we were just talking about, life as two Black folks, and she said, LeRon, for me, life is all about the negotiation. And what she meant by that is that she encounters racism, sexism every single day, and she has to decide, okay, which one is worth addressing, which one can I just let slide by, and which one I cannot tolerate. And so, you had just said that, we're all successful people. And just because, you may make six figures, just because you may not live in the hood, whatever, you're still not white. And so, when she said that, it really made me think. I mean, we're dealing with so many microaggressions, overt racism at the job, just supermarket, whatever. And so you have to just still be mindful, like, okay, so is this really important? Can I just dust this off my shoulders, or do I have to address this now?
Thank you for that, LeRon. I'd love to hear from Ming, who is in the Midwest.
I'm just soaking in everything that you're saying. I'm so grateful, Tricia, to be a part of this group. And what Nydia is saying is speaking so much to me, because Chicago is a pretty diverse area, but after the coronavirus, any Asian Americans that would be walking on the street, they would get spit on, and it just was no longer safe for them to be out in the neighborhood. And, like the whole othered and afraid, I'm just digesting all that, because I remember being at a local establishment in Chicago, and I just went up to the worker in the back and I said, "Hey, I know your kitchen's closing soon. Can I just get a snack? I just want like a quick snack." And he's like, "Oh, you probably want fried rice, right?" And I said, "No, I just like some chicken fingers would be great." And he's like, "We don't serve fried rice." And I went on this conversation with him back and forth. And, later on, I was talking to my friends about it. And I brushed it aside, because I was like, this isn't that bad. Like, knowing the other things that are happening to my friends are dealing with way worse types of racial slurs and racism. I'm like, this isn't that bad. And then when you were saying, Tricia, like, we have to speak our truth, I think it goes back to educating. Like, there's no such thing as not that bad. Like, it's all bad. Like, you don't get to talk to people like that. But I think the first is, like Nydia is saying, awareness and education. Some people don't know how to have the types of conversations. They're not knowledgeable of what could the conversation even sound like? What is that starting point? I married a Caucasian male, and we have biracial children, and we live in a very highly white area. It's like, I think their elementary school would be 98% Caucasian. And I said to him, just so you're prepared, our kids will get teased for being Asian. They look Asian. It will be a part of the conversations that their friends joke with them about. And he's like, what? I'm like, you're a white male. You don't understand. And so even though we're married and we've been together a long time, we're still having these conversations of how do we navigate all of this, and how do we educate our kids and our kids' friends and their families. And I don't have all the answers, but I'm just really happy that the conversation is happening and continuing.
I love what you pointed out, Ming, is that I can never know what it feels like to be a white male. However, I see what it gives everyone when you're a white male. I see the privilege. I also think that it's important. I will never know what it's like to be a 13-year-old Black boy. But with these conversations, what I get to do is learn and become conscious and understand, frankly, right and wrong. So that's so important.
But Tricia, you just said something so key. I'm sorry. You said you get to have these conversations, but also to be conscious and to learn. And there are so many people that are so closed off. When I posted about running with Maud, and I'm not a runner, I walked, and people don't understand just the trauma of being a Black person and having to see these things happen over and over again, and having your own self-care. Like, there were two men just recently in Georgia who were doing their job. They were delivering something that could have been my husband, because he's a delivery driver. And to some people, he may look like a thug. To me, he doesn't, but to someone, he may look like a thug. And I wish more people would be so open just to kind of put their own bias aside for a moment and see and hear others. I think a lot of times we don't have people who see and hear others and understand that everything does not have to be a combative conversation. It just has to be about sharing information. And when you talk about this stuff, the reality is, people say don't take it personal, but it is personal. You are sharing feelings.
Thank you.
And to add to that,
just say really quickly, Nydia is going to go take care of ABC News for us.
Yes, I'm so sorry. I'm live in our 4 o'clock show and in our 6
Keep
o'clock
doing
show.
it.
Tricia, I can try to pop back, but if I don't get to see all of you again immediately, I just want to thank you. I learned so much from all of you today, and I'm just so honored to have been part of this conversation. And a big shout out to you, Tricia, for being just one of the most thoughtful people that I know. So thank you. And I hope that we can continue this conversation another time.
I do too.
And I look forward to seeing the video so I can hear what happened after I had to leave. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care, Nydia.
Yeah.
Tamika, thank you for reminding us that it is personal.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really important reminder to have. And when you say to somebody, do you want fried rice, or I'm ordering Oriental food, that is not okay. I'd love to hear more from all of you.
Well, to Tamika's point, and Ming, to your point about kindly educating people. First of all, Tricia, it's a rare thing to have someone say, I get to have these conversations. Most people, I think, once you challenge something that's hardwired into them, that works for them, that they are comfortable with, they feel attacked. They feel fear. They feel they don't want to learn. Please don't come and challenge me. Don't come and make this about race. Don't take it personal means you're affecting me personally by trying to be a full person, and I don't want to see that. Tricia, you're able to realize that understanding is key to empathy. You're able to bring those walls down that Tamika talked about. That's something that a lot of people aren't able to do, regardless of what their cultural background is. And I kind of liken that kind education that Ming was referring to, like maybe if she said, actually, I know you're assuming because I'm Asian that I want fried rice, but I don't. I actually would really love some chicken fingers. And I understand why you probably might have thought that, but I'm just letting you know that not every Asian person wants fried rice. And that would be a kind, calm way to explain it, but you can't control the fear and the cognitive dissonance that's permeating that person's brain and soul and heart. And they may have an adverse reaction. I know from personal experience, I've had that happen where I kind of diplomatically explained to someone, I know you think you've got an idea of what a Black person is, but that's not necessarily me. And please don't put that on me. And I've likened it to pointing out that someone has spinach in their teeth. People can't see it, they can't feel it. And 9 times out of 10, when you point it out, you hope that the person's gonna be like, oh my God, thank you. I look ridiculous out here. But sometimes they're mad. Sometimes they're annoyed that you pointed out something that is actually making them look really crazy.
Right. One point that I'd like to make here is that, we're talking about education. We're talking about a discussion on race. And for me, like, I'm at a point in my life where, like, I just to keep it all the way live, I don't really have a lot of discussions about race with white people because for 2 reasons. For one, all this information is pretty much out there, right? So there's been books, there's been films, there's been speeches, there's just a whole catalog of just history and data out there. And so whenever I'm having this conversation, to quote the great Toni Morrison, feels like, I'm the doctor and the patient, and you can't be both at the same time. And secondly, just being honest, like it's really draining. It's very, it could be very mentally taxing, and it's not reciprocal. So you have Black folks, it's just a one-way transfer of energy. And it's like, what am I actually getting out of this? So the white friends that I have, the folks that I call allies, they take that labor off of me. They're like, okay, you know what, LeRon, stop. I'm going to educate this man. I was talking with my friend David yesterday, and we were talking about a Facebook exchange that we were all involved in. And we were talking about the Ahmaud Arbery shooting as well as the Black Panthers. And this person chimed in, and he was saying some really negative stuff. And so I don't engage in that, especially online. And so my friend David said, you know, LeRon, I got this. You don't need to be doing that. All that you have to do is be a Black man and survive. So I say that to say that I think that white people have to have the responsibility to start educating themselves, man. I mean, there's a lot of great groups. There's one called Surge. I believe it's white people standing up against racism, white supremacy. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that can pull you to the side and go, hey man, you know what? Let me tell you this from one white person to another, rather than just going to your Black friend and saying, well, how do you feel about this? And you have to ask yourself, is this person really getting anything out of this? Because they probably have had this conversation millions of times throughout their lives.
It's not enough for white people to be passive and say, I'm not racist. It's not enough. We have to be in the conversations. We have to be having the conversations about what it means to not just not be racist, but to inform. And also, like you just said, LeRon, what can I do to help reduce the burden for you in these conversations? And maybe we don't know, maybe I don't know. So that's where I say, tell me what I can do to eliminate, alleviate, reduce the burden in these conversations.
And you can also have Black friends and be racist. I hate when someone, well, this person has Black friends, or they have, you know, adopted a Black child, or they've done whatever. You absolutely can have unconscious bias. And actually, I think it's conscious bias. I know, I don't think it's always unconscious, against people who may have a Black coworker or a Black neighbor that they love to see. You know, I have an acquaintance who loves me dearly. She treats me dearly, but she doesn't see me as a threat. I'm not a threatening Black person to her, right? And when I tried to explain that to her, she didn't get it. And it's one of these things where I don't want to have to explain it. I think you need to seek the information. Now, if you want to ask for additional help, once you've done some of the heavy lifting of doing it, then we can have a conversation. And it wasn't always like that for me. When Tricia first asked me to be a part of this, I was very frank with her, and I told her I'd love to be a part of it, but I also want you to know that I feel like white people have to do the heavy lifting on this. This is not something that Black people, brown people, Asian people, people of color can change. This is something where white people have to see that that racism, yes, is alive. Racism has now been amped up in the last few years. And people, they just don't care. They feel like if this person up on this hilltop says it's okay and they do it, we can all take our mask off. We can all do whatever we want, say whatever we want. But we as humanity, we have to stand up and say, no, we will not tolerate that. But we have to know that it's not going to be an easy thing. And we have to keep pushing and keep on doing this. But it means you have to keep educating yourself. And one of the beautiful things that came out of this for me, I have someone who's always closeted, supported me. And when she wanted to be a part of running for Maud, and she sent me a text message and she said, I hope this is okay. And if it's not, I'm very sorry, but is this okay to post? And it made me feel good because it made me feel like she cared. She cared, and it was a starting place. And I warned her that she would get backlash, and she did. But she went forward with it, right? She didn't get a lot of backlash, but she definitely got a comment that, and it was from someone who adopted a Black child, but they said something totally inappropriate because words do hurt. And racism is about the physicality, but also the emotional part of pain that is inflicted on other people.
Tell me more.
Say that again, please.
Say
That part.
more about that.
Because a lot of times people, why do you care? Just turn the other cheek. Turn the other cheek. It's just a word. If someone calls you a derogatory word. But if you don't know the true emotional pain of being called something that is so degrading, that is meant to strip you of your power, it's painful. It is physically painful. And you won't ever understand that. You know, you can sing a rap song, you can, you know, watch a movie and something is thrown out. But when it is cast your way in a way to make you feel less than, to make you, to be a reminder that you will never be a part of this, it is painful. So yes, it's a word that some people may think like, what is that? Just let it go, look the other way. It's not that easy. It's not that easy knowing that your skin is always in question.
It's an amazing litmus test for realizing who your real friends are and how to use that word. Because as you said, Tamika, this was an acquaintance. Just because you work with someone who's Black doesn't mean you have friends that are Black. Just because someone is of color and in your service doesn't mean you can say that that's my friend, because there is a power dynamic there that maybe you're above that person. Maybe that person's job depends on you. Maybe your comfort, maintaining your comfort and not really telling you, you shouldn't do that or say that or post that, might have negatively affect me. So maybe I'm not being a real friend to you when telling you, listen, what you just said shows me that you need to learn a little bit about looking at people as a full human being. Don't think that you can post whatever you want, whatever comment you want at the bottom of something on one person's, but you probably wouldn't post that on someone that you perceive as being like you. So it's kind of hard to say, like, talk to your friends about this, because some of them aren't really your friends. And I just, whenever I have those moments, I call them quality moments, I just say, whether it's online or in person, I just say, you know what? Thank you. Because now I really know where you truly stand with me. So
that's what I love, knowing where people stand. So when I'm like you, LeRon, I don't get into a whole lot of swing in the mud and fights on social media. I don't like a lot of negative, toxic energy. I'm a cancer survivor. I don't have time for that. But I do like knowing who is an ally and who is not. And that has become incredibly helpful for me as someone who wants to be a better person. I love sharing that, you know, growing up, there may have been something that you thought was okay to say and not okay to say. And you get older, you live in a more diverse neighborhood, you have more diverse friends. And so for me, it's always about protecting my Blackness, my Black husband, my Black family, and making sure that I remind people that Black is beautiful. It is, you know, just beautiful in so many ways.
It's
and I love seeing, I love seeing Black people on TV, Black people in magazines, but I also love seeing everyone else too. And it's a reminder of teaching my 17-year-old stepdaughter, who I'm helping to raise, like, you know, if you hear someone saying this about someone, we had something that happened at the start of this pandemic, and it was very important for me to go and support an Asian American business, someplace that if the pandemic wasn't going on, we would have been going, you know, once a week. And she was like, we can't go there. We can't get anything from there. And I was like, it's fine. It's totally fine. She was like, I'm not going to go. I was like, you're going to come with me. She went. We had a great time. The people remembered us, and they gave out with each order, a little Ziploc baggie with masks in them. And it was a great teaching moment to not only remind her, be careful of what you read on social media and share and who's sending you that information, but also remember what it's like for us, right? It's like this for us. This is what other people are going through. And this is why we have to support them. And even if somebody doesn't always support us and our culture and what we're doing, we're always going to stand up for what's right and what we value for humanity as a whole.
Amazing. Something you brought up, which I think is really, I want to shine a light on it a little bit more, is that you're all sharing with me right now, you identify who's an ally. That is not something most people are conscious of, who are not of color.
Right.
So I first want to thank you for bringing that to my attention. And I want to be able to also say that I'm hoping that we will all have more allies after this COVID experience, because we are all being affected by it. And being able to talk about loss of life, loss of business, loss of human connection, we must come together as allies more now than ever. So I think that's really powerful, that language that you're using, Tamika and LeRon, around who are your allies. Andrew, I'd love to hear a little bit more from you in terms of your experience as a Latino man.
It's interesting. I'm living for hearing all the stories and being a part of this conversation, because this is a conversation that it wasn't possible when I was a child, you know. And it's fascinating that what it takes to get us here is unfortunate, but it's really beautiful that we can have this conversation, this open dialogue about this. The Latin community, a lot of time, and I don't want to speak for the entire community, but there's a way we operate through society that is we kind of dip into different worlds when it's appropriate. Mm-hmm. And it's a thing, and it's created a uniquely mixed cultural identity where we're afraid to embrace certain aspects of the culture, encouraged to embrace other aspects of the culture. And it's different. And one thing that really is disappointing about the community is that we're unkind to each other. So different Latin cultures have very strong opinions about each other, relate to each other in different ways, love to spout generalizations about other cultures. And then even within your own, like within Puerto Rican culture, there's a vast divide between island-born Puerto Ricans and New York-born Puerto Ricans. So my own personal journey, I'm growing up in a situation where I'm very aware that I am an ethnic minority. It's the home that I grew up in. It's the life that I lead. I'm in a small suburban town in Central Florida where people don't really know what I am. They kind of guess. I get treated a variety of different ways depending on how that particular person feels about how they think I look that day. It's very, very inconsistent. People tell me, you look like you just have a tan, you're not anything. And then I try to embrace my Latin identity, and I'm greeted with island-born Puerto Ricans being like, you're not really Puerto Rican though. See, I'm actually Puerto Rican. And that, it's hurtful. You know, it's hurtful because what they're not seeing in trying to really be in a space of power of their own identity, they're denying mine to create power for their identity. And that's something that is part of my own personal journey that I like to share. So it's fascinating to be so welcomed and so open, because I've definitely been in a variety of spaces and tried to have conversations like this with fellow Puerto Ricans and not been so welcome and embraced.
That's amazing. That's such a strong point of view and observation that I was unconscious of. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh no, my pleasure to share. It's very real. The racism within the Latin community is very, very toxic and very pervasive. There's a lot of it, and it's a wonderful thing that we of different varieties of people of color can come together and discuss things, because that's the only way something is going to get sorted. We have to listen to each other and be open that everyone's different. Everyone has a different background. It's very powerful to have a space like this and very special.
And I think that is the idea that in someone sharing their truth will not minimize mine is not something people understand. And it's like, I've said this next phrase, that we are a race and a people that live from scarcity and lack, not abundance. And there's a thought of, if you're going to be successful, it means I'm less successful. If you speak about your hardships, then it means I don't have any at all. It's like there's this selfish thought that for someone else to speak in the room, it depletes the oxygen. No, not at all. When more people speak, there's more oxygen, there's more energy, there's more possibility, there's more learning, there's more understanding, there's more loving. And we as individuals have to take it upon ourselves to allow ourselves to sit in that discomfort, to sit in that fear, whatever that is, and offer the other person some love and some grace for ourselves. You know, we might think it's for the other person, but it's really for ourselves. And so if I hear someone speak that makes me feel uncomfortable, I know myself well enough to know that it's not about what they're saying to me. It's about how I feel about what they're saying to me. And no other person can make me feel any way I don't want to feel. And so when it's like, there is space for all of us. And I mean space in a physical sense. I mean space in a financial sense, and an emotional sense, and an intellectual sense. There is space for every single one of us. Because at the end of the day, every single one of us breathing and living today will cease to exist. So why not choose an option to see someone who you may not necessarily fully understand or connect with as just a human being, and just say to yourself, all right, I don't know everything about them, or what I've heard about them, or what I think I know about how they look comes from all these other sources. Consider that it's like we're all Rubik's cubes. There's so many pieces, so many colors, so many things that make us like a human being, and there's no way to know. There's no way to know. And I just really, it's so disheartening that scarcity can be so pervasive, the belief of scarcity.
That is
totally dig that.
another layer on top of discrimination and racism, for sure. I think that it's also really important. We know this is a systemic issue. This is a systemic issue.
Yeah.
So it's our responsibility, all of our responsibility, to choose to come at this with thought, consciousness, letting go of what we might have been taught or learned. And really, thank you, Gisela, and really come together with a new conversation and a new thought process. And what can I ask you so I will know more? What can I learn from you? What can you learn from me? What can I remove from my past and my history that was put on me and forced on me because of other generations? This is how we progress. This is how we stop having to deal with racism, begin to live with it, and then potentially move past it and beyond it.
It's a behavioral task that we all, each and every citizen, no matter what end of the pyramid of white supremacy you're at, the idea of scarcity comes from the idea that it's a finite pie and we all have to fight for our slice. And that's where the idea of dividing and conquering comes from. That's why, Andrew, you saw in your life people saying, well, you're not Puerto Rican, or maybe like my mother was Haitian Dominican. They would say, well, I'm Dominican, I'm not Black. Oh, well, you're light skinned, you're Grimel, you're darker. I don't want to marry you because I don't want my kids to be like, there's all of these little, this semblance of division that becomes real. And with that, you become sequestered. And with that, you feel like, I don't know what's happening because you're in your own little sleeper cell of existence. You don't have the time to have that thought because your brain is pickled in this fear and this idea of scarcity. And I think if everyone gets to a point where we need to change our everyday behavior, our everyday instances, let go of the fear, let the fear subside, then you can have a conscious thought. It's just, you're very prescient, and not everyone is, because you're able to, and I'm speaking to you, Tricia, you're able to bring that wall down and say, let me think about something outside of myself and empathize with the other person. You can't do that when you're living in a mind, a mindset of scarcity or a mindset of fear. Right. Whether you're in a project out in, Bed-Stuy, or you're in a gated community in Florida, you're encapsulated in this fear and this idea of scarcity. And that's what makes people fight the urge to learn, fight the need to learn something new. So once we as a nation get past that we accept that, like, I'm scared. I shot that man because I'm scared, because I don't know anything about him. I held my purse because I'm scared, because I don't know anything about that person. I assume the worst because it's easier for me to make a decision based on this preconceived notion of who everyone is. It's ironically, it's so human of us to do that. It's a weird survival mechanism that I hope we one day realize we no longer need.
And I think if anyone asks themselves the question of, well, where do I start? What do I do?
Right.
I think start by saying to yourself, I think I could be a part of the problem and I want to change that.
Right.
And just say it to yourself every day. Write it down in a journal, because when you speak about something, it shatters the illusion of it just shatters the illusion. And I think, when you want to achieve something and you can no longer be ignorant to it. That's what I want to say. When you acknowledge something, you can no longer be ignorant to its existence.
100%.
And from that day forward, just because you've spoken it into existence, your spirit is going to fight against you stepping back, because you're going to see things. And then when you want to say, oh, I'm not going to say anything, or I'm not, then your spirit's like, we've already spoken this into existence, so I'm not going to leave you alone. And I think that is where people buck up against these conversations is, and we said this earlier, they don't want to be confronted. But, and it's not that other people are confronting them. It's like your own spirit is speaking to you, and your spirit will keep knocking until you answer that door.
Magic, I love that. And I want to give everybody an opportunity, really quick, LeRon, I want to give everybody an opportunity to share an action, a tactic, a tip, a quote, something that like Magic just did. LeRon, would you like to come in next?
Yes, yes, ma'am. I think the most important thing is to listen. And what I mean by listen is to listen, not to respond, but just really listen. Like a lot of times when people are having a conversation and, they're not really hearing what you have to say because they already have something loaded up. I just want you to just be present. My lady's always saying, LeRon, be present. So I want you to be present, listen to what they have to say. You may not understand what they are telling you now. You may not agree with it, but I guarantee you, and this is something that happens to me all the time. I'll take a little nugget, I'll store it, and then, months, years later, it'll just blossom, and I'll be like, I understand what he was saying. I understand what she was saying. I get it now. So everybody just listen, and if I can add just one more thing, just be in the mindset to learn. My favorite historical person is Malcolm X. And one of my favorite things about Malcolm is like he was always evolving and changing. And so just listen and just be open to change your viewpoint. And I guarantee you, man, life will get a hell of a lot better for you.
Tamika, any final words?
One of the things I miss most about traveling is going and experiencing different cultures around the world. This is not the same as it, but it really has fed my soul today to be able to be a part of this and hear and learn from everyone's stories. I want to thank all of you for allowing me to be a part of it, especially you, Tricia. But what I want the viewers to know is that privilege isn't just about a gated community. It's also about the foothills of the mountains, the trailer park, the just middle class subdivision, the grocery store. So privilege isn't just about where you live. I also want people to think about unconscious bias. So if you see someone and you're, say, a white person, and a little young girl that you love has unicorn hair, but if you see someone who may be black or brown and her hair has pink or blue or purple highlights and you think it's ghetto, that's an unconscious bias. Those are the things that I want people to really start considering and thinking about. And don't think of this as something that's going to change overnight, but you have the opportunity to be, as it was already said, not only a better version of yourself for humanity, but also be an example for whoever is watching, listening, and paying attention to you. And so we all have a part to play on this, but I'm asking the people who need to do the heaviest lifting, white people, to do something today, not tomorrow, not next year, to start somewhere and do something right now.
Thank you, Tamika. Ming.
That's a hard act to follow, Tamika. No apologies necessary. I agree with LeRon, when you said be open, I was like, oh, that's mine. But I think that we're all in this, it's all good. We're all on the same page, right? That's why we're all here, is to just be open to the possibilities, that as you're listening to conversations, the immediate reaction isn't like, no, like that's not me. That couldn't happen in my neighborhood. That couldn't happen around people I care about. But just take a moment and be open to a different point of view, be open to a new conversation, be open to new friendships. And thank you. Even though I'm part of this group, I'm learning so much, and I have so much to marinate. I have lots of nuggets, LeRon, that you're talking about that are marinating. So thank you.
Super value meal of nuggets.
You mean Andrew, thoughts, final words?
Going along with the theme of remaining open and being these and earlier we talked about fear, and fear motivates us in such unique ways, and I think a lot of closeness may be rooted in a fear of being proven wrong, because if we're wrong, it challenges our existence and our understanding. And I think it's something important to find power in being proven wrong, because that creates new growth, that creates an area for you to develop. And a lot of times we spend so much time being afraid of somebody proving us wrong that we'll have, like you were saying, you have the response loaded up, or when you talk to someone and you can see them thinking, they're not listening to you, they're thinking of their rebuttal while you're talking. Be open to being proven wrong. I love being proven wrong because that's an opportunity for me to grow and develop. So I think it's important that we do that. Thank
you, Andrew. Final words, Gisela.
I just got so into listening to everyone. Just thank you for doing this. Thank you for inviting me into this, into your kitchen table talk. If I were to say anything, besides agreeing 200,000% with what Tamika said and the nuggets, that idea, I love that idea of ruminating and thinking and maybe implanting something in someone today, and maybe we may not see the results of what they're going to learn, but knowing that you put it out there and it'll have a positive ripple effect. I love that idea. All I can say is maybe I encourage people watching this to, especially if they are a human being who happens to be white, to invite their friends of various backgrounds, age groups, cultural groups, to have a meeting like this and to just talk frankly and say, I want to be your true friend and ally. I want you to let go of the fear that you're feeling about making me feel uncomfortable, teaching me something new. Let's just be honest in this moment, because this moment is all we have. Let's do it today, not tomorrow, not next week. Let's do it today. And maybe that will have a positive ripple effect once the world unpauses.
I think it will. And I want to also just highlight that it is our responsibility to not assume that we are your allies. It is our responsibility to say, I am your ally.
Hot damn.
Really, really important. I want to thank Nydia Han, Gisela, Adisa, Antuan, Magic, Raimone, Andrew, Sotomayor, LeRon Barton, Ming Shelby, and Tamika Felder. It has been a true gift, pleasure, and honor to have conscious conversation with you on the Big Talk Roundtable. This will be posted in Facebook. I will share it with all of you as well. So if you'd like to share this video, we were unable to go live, but this conversation was going to be had no matter what. So thank you all. You are all my heroes. I consider you my friends. I am forever your ally. And I look forward to these conscious ripples that we are going to put out into the world. I hope that you will start sharing your powerful story today, and be sure to subscribe and click on that notification bell so that you get access to my newest and latest videos. And I really appreciate that you are here and will always respond to the comments. Big love.